Just to introduce myself, I'm a professor of computer science. So I look at everything from a technological viewpoint. And the other important thing is I'm based in the UK. So I'm experiencing post-truth in Brexit in an emotional basis. In fact, when Alex invited me to come here, and thanks for that, the first response was, can I get a discount? To which he said no. But
I said no.
So maybe next time I'll get a discount if you're enduring this emotionally in your home country. So I'll talk about self-sovereignty, blockchains, and truth. So a few slides, because that's what academics do. So this is a very, very famous cartoon. It's very famous among geeks from 1993 from the New Yorker. On the internet, no one knows that you're a dog. And the main thing, the serious point behind this is that there are some flaws in the way the internet was designed, and one of the fundamental flaws is there's no real identity control. So you can, especially in 1993, you could do anything you like, and nobody knows who you are. And that's still more or less the truth today, and it's a flaw, it's a fundamental flaw in the design. There was a follow-up cartoon, which may be not as well known, in 2015, which basically says, do you remember the good old days when nobody knew who you were on the internet? So we almost have 2 points of view. Nobody knows who you are. But on the other hand, there are some people that know too much about you. So some of the big tech companies know far too much. There are some other issues related to this that trouble me and motivate the work that I do. One from Tim. So I work in an area related to a field that Sir Tim Berners-Lee founded, and I'm working with some of his team at the moment. So I don't know if the quote is true, but this is a real quote from the Vanity Fair article after they interviewed Sir Tim. And he basically says he has some concerns about the web, and he has spoken about this. And basically it's to do with the over-centralization of the web, especially of the data, with companies like Facebook and Google and others. And he says it's a large-scale emergent phenomenon which is now anti-human. So that may be an overstatement of what he said, but he's definitely concerned. So the over-centralization of data is a problem. There was a journalist at The Guardian who asked Google, can you please give me all the data about me, which you're allowed to do in Europe with GDPR. And they had 5.5 gigabytes worth of data on him, which is 4 movies worth of data on him. That's a lot of data. So they knew, of course, everywhere he'd been, everything he'd searched. They had an advertisement profile, all the apps he's used, all his YouTube history. Now, of course, there are settings in Google and on the apps that you can use, but not everybody uses them correctly. In 2010, the government introduced a hostile immigration policy. Hostile was the word that they used. So that's quite worrying. For illegal immigration. Because of this, you now... Another thing that concerns me is you have to prove that you're a UK citizen. There are some people that suffer because of a lack if you want to have a job, if you want to get health service. I went to a workshop, it's called Thin Files for the Data Poor. And these are people really suffering healthcare. This was UK focused. So a lot of these people suffered, some were thrown out, just no data. So some of the pieces of evidence, there are 2 billion adults on the planet who are unbanked. This country, they have no landing card, which means they can't get any credit. In around 2000, just after 2011, UK government thought it was a good idea to burn these. They had a big bonfire, and they burned persons with tons of landing cards. So some people who'd never travelled, so they didn't have a passport, couldn't prove they'd been in the UK. Some were thrown out. Some were thrown out and died abroad. Some were separated from their children, etc. So it's a big problem. So I see the problem in two ways: over data and lack of data. So if you break up the types of data that people are talking about around these issues, there are claims. So the citizens, people want to make a claim. I can drive a car, I can vote, I can get health service, I can drink, I have a qualification. Then there are proofs of those claims. So your driving license or other certifications that you may have to prove that you're entitled to something. And then there's attestation. So other third parties that people can ring up, or they can get some sort of proof that, yes, this person is really who he says he is, yes, he really has a PhD, etc. Things that can happen to the data changes or gets burnt by your government. Fake data, so people creating fake identities for you, or just fake data from incorrect administrative or civil service procedures. If data can be centralized, can generate other types of issues. So you can have toxic data, which can lead to bad side effects, which is hard to change. So one of the problems with some of the most disadvantaged who suffered from these types of problems is that they don't always have the best digital skills. So there is a new lab that we've been collaborating with a bit in Cardiff, and they're called the Data Justice Lab. So they're arguing for things like having data justice campaigners for people who aren't so digitally literate. There are, of course, jurisdictional politics, which can vary from region to region, vary across nation states, and if data is centralized, that can cause problems. There can be monopolistic tendencies, so with companies, especially the best example is probably Facebook and Cambridge Analytica, and their abuse of data that they collected for other purposes. So there's this notion of self-sovereignty. So for most of the people in the world, they have a digital identity. If they have a digital identity, it will either be from their company, from their host university, if they're a student, or from a large tech company, their internet service provider, or Google, or Facebook. So there's this notion of having an identity which is truly yours, that you can create and is yours for your life and not under the control of others. And there are various technologies for that, some of which I'll mention in a moment. But this idea that you can create a document, you can create the attestations, the proofs, and the claims, and they're all under your control. So there is, one of the best known is one called Sovereign. So it's a company where you can basically create your own decentralized identity, which is based on blockchains. I'll say how in a moment. Let me just give the 10-minute or the 5-minute recap of what a blockchain is for people that don't know. There was a mention this morning. So, of course, a blockchain is simply a ledger. It's a ledger of transactions that have occurred, and banks are interested because all a bank is a ledger, and banks spend a lot of energy in reconciling ledgers overnight. With a blockchain, there's only one ledger, which is a global source of truth, so it saves banks literally tens of billions of dollars or euros. It depends. There are a number of things that facilitate trust in a blockchain. One is you can take a thumbprint of any file, a hash, which means if anyone changes the file, you know, because the thumbprint has changed. You can preserve privacy by, instead of dealing with files, you deal with the thumbprints. You put the thumbprints on the blockchain. So a blockchain is just a set of records which are linked together through this thumbprint mechanism. So if anyone changes any piece of data on the block, you know, because the thumbprint works. And then it's a peer-to-peer system. So it's not owned by any central body, it's owned by the community. So if all of us in this room decided we want to start up our own company, maybe an alternative to Facebook, we could do that from our smartphones, more or less. We could start up our own blockchain company, and it would be running on our phones according to exactly the rules that we would say. No postings of cats allowed, only postings of climate change, whatever it is, we will only pay ethical advisors, and we would all control that. We would see what everybody else is doing. So a number of ways this is used in the decentralized identity. So within W3C, the body that looks after the web, which is another big community. They have something called the Verifiable Claims Working Group, and they say what people are talking about with identity is there are three main players. There are owners, to which the claims are about. I can drive. There are people that issue those claims, so the driving authority in your country, and then there are verifiers, so people who want to verify those claims. And there is some sort of relationship between all those three. And then they're working on web standards to have these, so you don't have to show all of your identity when you go out to drink, for example. And then with the blockchain, you just basically remove the need for any central authority. So the blockchain is this one global sense of truth owned by the community. You can put all the elements around the claims onto the blockchain, and they can be signed by anybody you like, and then that decentralizes it. And it removes the need for some intermediary who may or may not do bad things. So another technology which we're looking at, it comes from Sir Tim Berners-Lee, and it's his technological response to the problems that he has with the web, which he created, more or less. So with Solid, we're moving from the world on the left, where if you use most of the applications you use from your phone or from your laptop or tablet, where everyone keeps your data. With Facebook, LinkedIn, or Doodle, the application and your data are in one place, to a world on the right where you have your personal data store. You store your data wherever you want. You store it on your phone, on your laptop, or you store it in your favorite place. And then companies get your permission to access the data. So all of their applications become skins, internet skins, over your data. And we're using this for in a lab, which I'll show you in a moment. So that's another thing where you give people control over their data. So give people control over their identity and give them control over their data, which is so important in today's world. So just one example of something we're doing in our lab. So we're using this for accreditation. So for having micro-accreditation, which can be signed and sit on a blockchain. So we've taken there's a standard for this called open badges. We've put them on the blockchain. And we had one summer school where the students had a physical badge. So they had a physical badge which changed color as they did different tasks. And every time it changed color, there was a record of that on the blockchain, which they could take home. And then we think there's a great space. So one of the great things about blockchain is it can sit in between different players. And not everybody has to trust everybody else because the blockchain can somehow be trusted. And we think there's a great niche in the employability space. So in between educators, students, and employers. So we've been moving towards automatic recommendation of jobs. So here's a tool that we built where students are acquiring skills on their badges, which is on the blockchain. And at the top, the system is automatically matching their skills in their accreditation to the skills in jobs which are found online. So the top panel, here are all the jobs which you're now qualified for, and this is where they are in Europe. And the bottom panel, here are jobs for which you're nearly qualified for, and where you're missing skills, we found courses which can fill those needs. So a decentralized system which acts as towards a career coach for students, where everything is trusted, the skills and the jobs, etc. Okay, that's all I wanted to say.